hot rails, booty bumping, and even just like pills. There's a surprisingly diverse number of ways that people use crystal. So why does it matter which way you use it, and what are the risks for each method? Today, I, a drug scientist, am going to go over everything you need to know about the routes of administration of meth. So a video about this was not on my radar until I went to give a speech at a probation officers conference. And after that talk, I got a lot of questions related to like the ways that people use drugs, specifically things like crystal. And people were like, okay, but like if you have it up your butt for a short period of time, or if you like pop it between people's butts, like how long will that show up on a drug test? And honestly, I have no idea about the answer. Like this is not the type of math that my high school teacher said I was going to be doing in my future. Then I looked at my DMs and there's a whole bunch of other questions about things like hot rails. Like, what is the point of it? And I'm like, okay, fine. I will do a video about all of the different ways that people use meth. Because again, there's a variety of them, way more than I ever thought there was going to be. So let's explore. And here's why we should explore. Because we have basically no information out there for people who are using crystal. And this is a big deal. Like we know that approximately 1 million people use crystal every year. And we know that on average, one person per day is trying it for the first time. And the ways that you use drugs really matter in terms of like how addictive they are and how likely you are to transition into addiction from just trying it in the first place. So let's start with kind of the riskiest method. And that is intravenous or directly injecting. So a lot of people directly inject it into their vein, basically until they cannot anymore, until their veins are no longer able to handle it. And injection is the riskiest because it is the most likely to cause things like overdose. It is the most likely to lead to addiction. So in terms of people who are trying to quit, they are less likely to quit if they had used the injection method of meth. Is also linked to all sorts of negative consequences. So things like increased rates of infection, which makes sense because it is injections. You also have things like violent behavior, psychosis. It's linked to things like meth mouth, even though if you're injecting it, you're not actually directly having the chemical interact with your teeth at all. But still, that lack of self-hygiene that you get from just kind of persistently using the drug, that leads to meth mouth, even if you're not smoking. Now, it used to be that people were just like primarily smoking meth, and that was like the main way that they were using it. But what we're seeing is that people are transitioning more and more to actual injection. Like, we don't know if they're starting with injection or they're just moving from smoking to injection, but the rates of injection have been going up. And smoking and injections are both very similar in terms of like how quickly they come on, but injection is just a tiny bit faster. So you're getting those effects in like 1 minute versus like maybe 2 minutes for more of the peak. And with any drug, with any route of administration that's faster, you are more likely to become addicted to it. So for example, crack cocaine versus powder, what you're seeing is that if you're smoking it, you're feeling the effects faster than if you're snorting it. And so crack is a little bit more likely to become addictive than powder because it is used in that route of administration. Now, smoking has lots of side effects too. Like smoking things bad for your lungs. Everyone knows that. So you can have things like lung infections, and then you also can have things like that meth mouth. Now, people will typically transition from smoking to injecting because it's a little bit cheaper for injecting, but again, a lot of bit more dangerous. And then there's booty bumping, also known as plugging or keystering, where you are basically putting meth up your butt. So in a lot of cases, what you'll do is you like fill a syringe with water and then the drug. And then basically the syringe has no needle. Let me make that very clear. But then you basically just like inject it up your butt. And what happens is that it will be kind of absorbed through the rectal lining. And so in the blood vessels there. So you can overdose pretty quickly on things like this too. Like it has a very fast effect and a lot of the drug is bioavailable. Like that means that more of the drug is actually getting into your bloodstream and is able to produce its effects in the brain. So a lot of people will switch to this method because, yeah, it's slower than things like smoking and injecting, but also it is not as potentially problematic for things like your lungs or developing infections. But also you're putting something up your butt, and some people don't find that pleasant. And yes, this can have some side effects too. So like a lot of people start pooping blood and they're like, when you start pooping blood, you can just switch to a different method, which like, I feel like you should just switch to not using the drug at that point, but meth is strongly addictive. So it is not as easy as like somebody just quit. Like that's going to be great for you. Everyone knows that using drugs that make you poop blood, probably not good for you, but also a lot of people are addicted. And that's part of the problem with meth is that we have such a stigma against it that we're not actively giving people information to help them more safely use the drug that they're addicted to. Instead, we're just kind of shaming them for having the addiction in the first place. And they're not going to get treatment when you shame them. Also, just in general, have more empathy. Okay, off that rant now. So the least common methods are things like snorting, which again is a little bit slower, and then also things like just taking it in a pill form. So some people will basically just like eat it or drink it. Snorting has its problems, obviously, too. So, like, if you've known somebody who's used Coke for a long period of time, if you snort something, it can destroy your nasal lining. So, people have gone to things like hot railing, which, by the way, is not actually better for your nose, but it's this idea that you're basically like heating up a glass or metal pipe, and then you're just basically like pushing it along a line, and then that will kind of lead you to have the vapor. So, you're kind of like smoking it through your nose a little bit, and people say that this might be stronger. There is no evidence of this. And again, this might be because of the like stigma aspect. Like, we are not doing research on hot railing, even though a lot of people are using it. And we don't know if it's more dangerous or less dangerous or more problematic long term, or maybe more likely to cause addiction or even more potent. We don't know any of that. But we know that there are a variety of people using this drug in a variety of different ways, some of which are way more likely to be dangerous. So maybe we can do some harm reduction techniques here and say, like, okay, if you're going to use it, like, don't use it in this method. And that's true for basically any drug. So like alcohol, I can do an entire video about all of the different routes of administration for alcohol and like why eyeballing alcohol is a terrible thing for you. So a lot of people think that like the different methods that you use a drug with, like those are all equally as likely to cause addiction or equally as likely to be dangerous. That is not true. The faster it is, the more likely it is to be addictive, and the more likely it is to be dangerous in general. So let's get this type of information out there. And so even if you're not a person who uses meth, of which there are a lot of you, at least you have a general understanding about what's going on. At least you know what type of paraphernalia you might see, and at least you know how you might be able to talk to somebody who might have a problem with this. Because there'll never be a day of no use, but at least there could be a day of safer use.